Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off this morning. Many people are going to need to stay inside today, taking shelter with more deadly storms sweeping across the midsection of the country. Since last Thursday, these storms have spawned more than 100 tornadoes, and the threat continues today. This morning, 37 million people in the Mississippi River Valley are at risk for more extreme weather. That includes tornadoes, hail, and destructive winds. The National Weather Service says at least 7 tornadoes have touched down in North Texas over the past 2 days. The powerful winds damaged buildings, uprooted trees, and knocked out power throughout the area. In hard-hit St. Louis, thousands of buildings were damaged during Sunday's storm, but cleanup efforts are going to have to be put on hold as more severe weather is expected to hit the area today. And you can see the extensive damage in Kentucky, where entire neighborhoods were nearly flattened by tornadoes over the past several days. This morning, people there are preparing to take cover again as they brace for more wicked weather. Meteorologist Angie Lastman is standing by with the forecast. But first, NBC News correspondent Kathy Park has the latest from London, Kentucky.
Good morning, Joe. Overnight, several confirmed tornadoes were reported in Nebraska and Oklahoma, and unfortunately, portions of Kentucky are back in the bullseye again for more severe weather. Here in London, Kentucky, this is the aftermath of a likely EF3 tornado with winds of more than 135 miles per hour. You can see the damage literally stretches for miles. Yesterday, we saw homeowners coming back, volunteers pouring in, salvaging what they could, placing tarps on homes that are still standing. But officials are urging residents with more storms on the way, and if they are in the path of more severe weather, to have a plan in place, have a safe space, especially if you will be at home. Remember to avoid windows. If you have a basement, head there. That's what one family did. They headed downstairs and they made it out alive. But unfortunately, as you can see, this home has been completely destroyed.
Thankfully,
Joe?
they're okay, Kathy. Thank you so much. Let's get to NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman. She's tracking where this latest round of storms is heading. Angie, good morning.
Morning, Joe. We've had already an active morning, and we've got more of what Kathy was just mentioning on the way for later today. One good news is we just saw this tornado watch expire across parts of the Ohio Valley, but we do still have this thunderstorm watch across parts of Arkansas here, at least through 8 a.m. Central Time. This line of thunderstorms has been pretty robust since the early hours in the morning, but notice this rain wraps all the way back up into parts of the upper Midwest, and it's kind of going to be rainy for the upper Midwest and across the Great Lakes, and then the Ohio and Tennessee valleys are where we're going to see that cold front kind of sliding through as the day goes on. The biggest risk that we're looking at, Mississippi, Alabama, and Kentucky. As we get into the afternoon hours, we'll see some of that severe weather potential ramp up. I'll show you the exact location in a moment, but looking ahead to tomorrow, all that moisture slides into the Northeast and parts of the Mid-Atlantic, as well as the Great Lakes. It's going to be kind of rainy for folks as we get into tomorrow and potentially into Thursday as well. You can see this kind of just hangs around with this low sitting offshore and keeping the heavy rain across parts of New England. This is going to be something we'll see at least for the next couple of days, potentially leading to some flooding concerns. The severe threat, though, through today and at least through this evening is focused across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. So you've got Nashville, Tupelo, right kind of in that bullseye of the enhanced risk, but slight risk extending from parts of Illinois down to Louisiana and out towards the Carolinas. All of the threats are going to be on the table, but we're most concerned about those tornadoes, specifically large tornadoes. Nashville, Memphis, metro areas have the potential to see that, but even St. Louis, Louisville, Knoxville, Birmingham, and Atlanta are some other metro areas that are included in the potential to see those tornadoes. Now, the good news is we've seen plenty of flood alerts expiring, but I have a feeling a lot of those are going to continue to be added on here as we just deal with all this heavy rain over a prolonged period. But looking ahead to at least Thursday, remember I said the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic are going to see some of that action. Well, we've got the potential to see 3, maybe 4 inches of rain. So we'll watch for some flooding concerns across that region in the days to come. Today, we're specifically going to see that slight risk centered over, you guessed it, the same area, parts of the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. So we've got Charleston, Lexington, Nashville, Knoxville, Evansville, all just a couple of locations that we'll be closely watching for the potential for some flooding. And again, those are some of those same crossover areas where we could see, Joe, some stronger storms, including the tornadoes, as well as the hail and wind gusts.
All right, Angie, thanks for keeping an eye on it. We appreciate it. President Trump announced that Russia and Ukraine will hold ceasefire talks, quote, immediately, after he held separate phone calls with both leaders on Monday. Hoping to bring an end to the 3-year war, Mr. Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin for more than 2 hours yesterday. there did not appear to be any significant breakthrough or any details on when or where negotiations would take place. Speaking to reporters following those phone calls, President Trump said he believes his Russian counterpart wants to end the war.
I think something's going to happen. It's a got very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved, but I think something's going to happen. I said, when are we going to end this, Vladimir? I've known him for a long time now. I said, when are we going to end this bloodshed, this bloodbath? It's a bloodbath. And I do believe he wants to end it.
NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now. So, Keir, tell us a little more about what President Trump and the White House are saying about this call with President Putin. Do they think it was constructive?
Yes, but there are many, many doubts. I mean, let's just try and break all this down, Joe, together, because it is a fast-moving and complex picture. Just quickly, President Putin does want a deal. President Trump is right about that, but President Putin wants a deal on his own terms. What effectively you heard President Trump say in the Oval Office yesterday and on Truth Social is suggesting that the call made progress when there really was limited progress. He says there's going to be direct talks between Ukraine and Russia, that they're going to start immediately. Well, they already started on Friday. They agreed some things. They didn't walk out of the room. They agreed to exchange 1,000 prisoners on each side. That's a big deal. But there wasn't a ceasefire, and that's a really crucial point. President Trump said that if he doesn't get progress, then he may back away in the weeks ahead. He has been threatening that for some time. It does look, in fact, like President Trump is really doing that already by saying, well, I'm not going to broker these talks. Maybe they can be held at the Vatican, and they need to be direct between the two countries, Russia and Ukraine. This is a change in his policy just from a few days ago, where he had said that a face-to-face meeting between him and the Russian leader was the way to solve this, the way to unblock it, if you like, as his envoy Steve Witkoff said over the weekend. He didn't unblock anything, as far as we can tell, based on the readouts from all sides.
Let's talk about the reaction on the other end of that phone call. What did we hear from the Kremlin and President Putin following the call, and what does that tell us about where things stand?
Yeah, what we heard from the Kremlin, President Trump said it was a very good call. The Kremlin says, it was incredibly friendly, that President Putin began by congratulating President Trump on the birth of his grandchild, that they called each other by their first names. According to the Kremlin, they didn't want to get off the phone. They wanted to carry on the conversation. What's interesting, though, is that immediately after the call, President Putin walked out in front of the cameras, state TV in Russia, and gave his readout even before the White House did. And crucially, what he said was that he is prepared to compromise. He will look towards a ceasefire, but that he still wants his core interests to be addressed, the root causes, as he calls it. And that's things like Ukraine not being allowed to get any closer to Europe, not being allowed to build up militarily. After 3 years of war, I mean, it's just impossible. So it was friendly, but no progress. I mean, you could call it, there's a long-running bromance between Trump and Putin, Joe. I mean, you could call it, at this point, I think, friends with no benefits.
That's quite the way to put it right there, Keir. So, and of course, there's a very key third party in all this. That's President Zelenskyy. What's Ukraine saying after all of yesterday's phone calls?
Zelenskyy is worried, I think. And there's a picture of the Europeans and Zelenskyy talking to President Trump on the phone. They look worried. And it's not surprising, because they recognize that they always recognized it was going to be difficult to get President Putin to agree to a ceasefire. What President Zelenskyy is saying now, effectively, to paraphrase, is don't back away, America. And the reason why he's saying that is because what does backing off mean that President Trump is threatening? Does it mean that America withdraws intelligence support, security support for Ukraine? Those kind of things would be very, very bad for Ukraine. Now, I should just mention that, on the other hand, Patriot missile defense systems just got agreed to be sent to Ukraine. The White House agreed moving those from other countries. So that's an interesting point. And two, in Congress, there's a bill that the White House says it cannot stop the progress of, that would impose massive more sanctions and enforcement on Russia. So there is a picture here that's developing that might be the U.S. Pushing Russia, despite the rhetoric from President Trump.
All right. Keir Simmons, good to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much. Let's get more on all this with former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Ambassador, always good to have you with us. What do you make of this latest effort by President Trump to try and get a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia? I thought Keir brilliantly spelled it out there. Friends with no benefits. Do you agree with that?
Joe, I have to agree. There was were conversations yesterday in several directions. But what we didn't get was indication that the Americans had put pressure on the Russians to stop the war, to agree to a ceasefire. That's what's necessary. It is certainly fine. It's appropriate that the conversations be between the Russians and Ukrainians. Yes. But it's important that the Americans be there to push, in particular the Russians, to come to some kind of an agreement.
The president said yesterday he has a red line in his head, which, if crossed, would lead the U.S. to actually walk away from these peace talks. How much does that concern you? I mean, do you think it's possible the Trump administration would not only abandon these efforts, but also abandon support for Ukraine?
That would be a mistake to abandon support for Ukraine. Ukraine is defending itself, of course, is defending Europe and defending U.S. interests. So it's important to continue U.S. support for Ukraine. It's also important for the United States to push the Russians toward an agreement. And that's going to take active involvement. Walking away, which is not something that the administration will look good doing. It'll be a mistake for them to walk away from this. It will demonstrate to everyone observing that Putin has outplayed us. Putin has outplayed the Americans. Putin has outplayed the president. And so the focus on moving Putin toward an agreement, toward a ceasefire, and then a broader agreement is going to be important policy objective for the United States.
Keir mentioned we just saw Russia and Ukraine hold these face-to-face talks for the first time in 3 years last week in Turkey. No ceasefire, but they did agree to that exchange of 1,000 soldiers. And then Keir just mentioned these missile batteries. When you heard that, what did you think, and what does that say about where things might stand?
It's a good sign, Joe. It's a good sign. There's apparently a Patriot missile battery coming from Israel. It's going to be refurbished and sent to Ukraine. There's apparently another missile battery coming from the Germans and the Greeks. And that's what the Ukrainians need. The Ukrainians need the ability to defend themselves against these continued attacks from the Russians. Over this last weekend, the Russians sent more missiles and drones to Ukraine, attacked Ukraine in numbers that hadn't been seen before, the largest numbers over the entire time of the war. So that's what the Ukrainians need, and it's a positive step that the Americans have been facilitating this movement of Patriot batteries to Ukraine.
Ambassador Taylor, always good to have you with us and to tap into your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
In other White House news, President Trump signed a bipartisan bill into law that cracks down on sexually explicit deepfakes. The president and first lady held a signing ceremony in the Rose Garden yesterday for what's known as the Take It Down Act. The legislation bans the non-consensual online publication of sexually explicit images and videos, both authentic and computer-generated. It also requires websites, with enforcement carried out by the Federal Trade Commission, to remove the imagery after receiving a request from a victim within 48 hours and to make efforts to take down any copies. Violators will be subject to mandatory restitution and criminal penalties like prison, a fine, or both. The Supreme Court is giving the Trump administration the authority to revoke special legal protections for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan immigrants. Those protections were initially granted during the Biden administration, but yesterday the High Court granted an emergency application that was filed by the Trump administration. It could pave the way for some of those migrants to be deported. The ruling reverses a decision made at the end of President Biden's term. It extended protections for nearly 350,000 Venezuelans under the Federal Temporary Protected Status Program. Those protections were given due to the political instability in that country. They were set to expire in October of 2026. President Trump is heading to Capitol Hill this morning to discuss what he's calling his one big, beautiful bill. The president will meet with House Republicans to discuss the multi-trillion-dollar domestic policy plan that would extend his 2017 tax cuts and increase spending for things like immigration enforcement. Nonpartisan analysts say it would also add to the nation's debt. Now, this comes after the House Budget Committee advanced the bill late Sunday, just 2 days after a group of hardline conservatives voted to reject it. Most observers believe it still needs work before it can pass the full House. Speaker Mike Johnson said he wants the bill to be considered before Memorial Day. To cover, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us now from Washington with more. Julie, good morning. So what are you hearing, first of all, about why this group of hardline Republicans changed their mind on the bill over the weekend? And just what are the hurdles that remain in getting it passed?
Yeah, hey, good morning, Joe. Well, they didn't really change their mind per se. They just agreed to vote present, and that is because there was a handshake, a backdoor agreement between the group of conservative hardliners, about 4 of them who sit on that committee, and the speaker. Unfortunately, though, even as we staked out negotiations late into the night yesterday, it's very clear that they still have a lot of work to be done. None of this is written in the bill that they are going to take up in that Rules Committee vote later tonight, early tomorrow at 1 a.m., however you want to call it, and that is because there are still some real disagreements on Medicaid changes. Conservatives want to speed up, for example, the timeline for which those new work requirements go into place. Moderates, of course, are worried about the impact this could have on their constituents. There are also some disagreements between conservatives and moderates over the Inflation Reduction Act. Conservatives want to repeal the clean energy tax credits even faster. Moderates say let's do it in a deliberative way because, of course, those projects have already started. So much to get done, and they want to vote on this bill tomorrow night.
A 1 a.m. Rules Committee meeting. That tells you everything you need to know about how quickly they want to get out of there. So with all these issues, today the president's coming to Capitol Hill. That's a big deal. What's the purpose of that visit?
That's a really great question because he's walking into a room in about 2 hours from now with a lot of disagreements. He's certainly not going to get in between negotiations. He's tried to keep his hand sort of off, or his thumb off the scale, if you will. He did say at first he was open to some changes to Medicaid. He then said there will be no cuts to the key program. But of course, they have to make cuts in order to make up some of the spending cuts that the administration wants to achieve. So he's probably not going to get in the middle of all that haggling. He's simply going to tell House Republicans, look, you have to pass this. The time for negotiations is over because, by the way, the Senate is probably going to take this bill, rip it up, and change it anyway. And the point here, of course, is for the House to pass this before the Memorial Day recess, according to Speaker Johnson, and then for the Senate to pass it sometime later this summer. They also want to raise the debt ceiling, that expiration date for that crucial date coming in mid-July.
Julie, one more thing happening here. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., is set to testify before a Senate Appropriations Committee later this morning. He's going to talk about the budget request for his department. Last week, when he testified before the House, his comments about not being someone who would give health advice, that got a lot of attention. So what can we expect there today?
It certainly did. This is the 3rd time we're going to hear from RFK Jr., of course, the HHS secretary, testifying before Congress. Last week he had 2 hearings. Today he has another one. This is all about the budget for the Department of Health and Human Services. This is an oversight process for Senate Republicans and Democrats. But of course, as you mentioned, he ran into some hot water during last week's hearing. Of course, his vaccine skepticism, his measles plan, his autism study, all of that is going to come into focus today as Democrats on this key subcommittee have a chance to question him. But as you saw last week, of course, we expect a similar line of questioning and back and forth as the administration proposed a 26% cut to the department that RFK Jr. oversees.
All right, Julie, I hope you find a 2-hour pocket to get some sleep sometime today. Appreciate it. The federal sex trafficking trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs has now entered its 2nd week here in New York City. On Monday, prosecutors continued to lay out their evidence against Combs, including disturbing images of the results of the alleged abuse of ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. A member of Combs' former girl group, Danity Kane, also testified in open court, saying that she saw Combs assault Ventura. After that, she says he threatened her life as a way to scare her into silence. NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas has the latest.
For the first time, images shown to the court in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial made public. Prosecutors releasing these exhibits. pictures of Diddy's former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, with what she says are bruises on her back and legs, as well as a gash above her eye. During her more than 20 hours on the stand, Ventura testifying that these injuries occurred during alleged assaults in 2013 and 2016. Also released these pictures from when Diddy was arrested at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York in September of last year. A special agent with Homeland Security testifying last week that the items found included bottles of baby oil and drugs including pink packets of ketamine. Meanwhile, on the stand, singer Dawn Richard offering dramatic and at times tense testimony about the years she spent working for Combs. Richard describing an incident in 2009 when she allegedly saw Diddy assault his then-girlfriend Cassie, testifying the next day she received a call from Diddy with a warning. Richard testifying, quote, "He said you could go missing, that we could die," going on to say, "I was shocked, but also scared." Combs is charged with 5 counts, including sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution, and faces up to life behind bars. He has denied all of the allegations against him. Combs discovering Richard on his hit MTV reality show, Making the Band 3. Signing her to the hit girl group Danity Kane. And then later the group Diddy Dirty Money. Diddy's defense team saying Richard's retelling of events has been inconsistent. When challenged by Combs' attorney Nicole Westmoreland, as time progresses, your story changes. To which Richard responded yes, adding that it's been difficult to remember these alleged incidents because she's, quote, tried to erase those memories. Combs' lawyer also arguing that Richard filed a civil suit against Combs in 2024, shortly after Ventura went public with her own accusations, saying that Richard only wanted money. But Richard saying it was about justice. Chloe Malas, NBC News.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.